أحلى ما في الدنيا إن آمنا يكون في أرواحنا يحيا بقلوبنا مكنون. أحلى ما في الدنيا إن آمنا يكون في أرواحنا يحيا بقلوبنا مكنون. بجمل كلمة يبرى كل هم مدفون، بعذب بسمه يجلى معها غم عيون. فيه الفرحة تسوى أغلى ما في الكون، ما في شيء أسمى من سلوى المحزون. أحلى ما في الدنيا إن آمنا يكون في أرواحنا يحيا بقلوبنا مكنون. عند الله بيرقى طيب حتى يكون في ميزاننا الأعلى للآخرة مخزون. فيها سعد يرسى دوم فيها يسون. أحلى ما في الدنيا إن آمنا يكون في أرواحنا يحيا بقلوبنا مكنون. فرحا من أي بلوى والراحة تهون، والراحة تهون. أحلى ما في الدنيا إن آمنا يكون.
Following is a repeat show that was previously broadcast on Unity FM.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Parenting Hour. You're tuned into Unity FM 93.5 here in the West Midlands and 105.1 to our listeners that are tuned in, our listeners that are tuned in on Inspire FM in Milton Keynes and Luton. Welcome to you all this evening. I hope you're all having a pleasant evening, inshallah. The weather is dark and dull and a bit rainy outside. I always seem to give a weather report when I start, but that doesn't dampen the atmosphere that we're having this evening on this show. We have a lovely show lined up for you, a very informative show lined up for you in a beautiful warm studio. This is my first time back into the studio since COVID. So I'd love to hear from you this evening, listeners. Please do ring in and tell us something new that you've done this week. If you're not going to join in the conversation that we're talking about which is about divorce and custody of children. And I have a really good expert with me that I'm going to be talking to about this, that is gathering information about what goes on, and she's going to tell us all about this as we try and to go through this evening's show. The number is 0121 772 8892. We do have a WhatsApp and text as well, which is 07947 773 949. Or, of course, you can email studio@unityfm.net. So we're really looking forward to hearing from you this evening, even if just about the weather. Do ring in and engage with us and tell us what you're doing, how is your day going, and more importantly, if you know of somebody or if you've gone through an experience of of divorce, where you've gone through the courts with trying to get custody of children, and you want to tell us about this. Tell us your experience, whether it was a good experience, where it was not such good experience. We'd love to hear from you. But to introduce my guest that's going to tell us more about this, I'm going to welcome Elani. Welcome. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you very much for having me this evening.
You're very welcome. I'm just going to put on the headphones so I can hear you better.
Okay.
That's
I
it.
too am in a very dark. We've had lashings of rain. I'm in London, and I'm upstairs in my bedroom so that my family can get on with their life this evening.
Well, we've learned to do things in different places over the last few years, indeed.
We have.
And it's amazing where you can do this show from if you're stuck. That is really good that you're in a quiet spot and you're able to talk to us about this vast topic this evening that we wanted to talk to our listeners.
It is.
So first, before we go into the topic, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I work for an organisation, a charity, called the Race Equality Foundation. We're a national charity, although our main office is based in North London. We have been going for about 30 years, if you've ever come across us. Essentially, our role is to tackle the inequalities which are based on racial inequalities. And we look to tackle those in public services. And my particular role in the organisation, I've been with the organisation now for something like 7 years, but worked with them for something like 10 years. My role is very much on the parenting side. So I know that you have approachable parenting. We have something called strengthening families, strengthening communities. And very similar, we are evidence-based as you are. And we again, on the basis of evidence, we have identified the protective factors which help our children grow in a healthy, safe way. And we know that one of the major protective factors is a good relationship between parents and child, which, again, I know that approachable parenting talks about very much.
It is, and it's all about what this program is about in Parenting Hour. So Parenting Hour is really reaching our parents and talking about issues. And actually, I was just before the show started talking about this to the manager of the studio this evening about the importance of programs, as you mentioned, but also, as you know, working with Muslims, that we go one step back and we actually do pre-marriage courses, and the importance of that to get it right and get the foundation right from the start to help that family grow and be able to communicate, be able to understand each other and to minimise the problems. There may be problems that come up, and of course in Islam divorce is allowed. It's not like some faiths, and people do go through this, but it's trying to minimise that where we can. That's what we try to do.
That's an excellent point, Kathleen, and very interesting, because we know that no two human beings are the same. We are all unique, even if we have the same faith. And we understand that we may disagree on values. So we could disagree on whether education is more important, for example, than our physical or spiritual well-being as parents. But we also know that what's really going on at the moment, what's very difficult, is that stresses externally come into families, don't they? And with economics being as they are, with the situation with COVID, we know that families have been under huge pressure and continue to be. So for all of these reasons, would the other faiths, or actually those without faith, didn't think more carefully when they entered into a long-term relationship to raise children about having some help to start from a solid foundation, as you put it. Unfortunately, not everybody does. And even those who do, we know outside stresses can come in and really cause some problems in families.
It can indeed. And this is where we are this evening, talking about some of those problems that start and then people have to separate, and of course children are involved. It's really sad, really, really sad. You've worked around this project that you're talking about this evening for a long time.
Yes.
What do you think is contributing to these factors? You know, is there one thing you can put your finger on, or is it numerous things?
I think it's numerous things. I think certainly in the work, and I've worked with parents. So before I came to Race Equality Foundation, I worked as a family lawyer for 20 odd years.
Wow.
You can see my grey hair. I'm quite an older person. And so I've never been able to put my finger on why. Some couples make it through and some couples don't. What's clear is that communication is very important, honest communication, positive communication. Actually, some families find help from extended families. Other couples, actually, it works in the opposite direction. So I can't quite put my finger on why it's happening. What we know is that the process, the system in this country, when people are having to go through the court system, is slow. It's expensive. And some people are reporting that it's not an easy experience for them emotionally or for their children. So this is very much part of the work that we are doing with the project that we'll be talking about this evening.
That's really hard, actually, because when you think of life and how hard life is, and when a couple have made that decision, or sometimes, you know, I maybe it's not the couple, it's one party, which we will talk about, that's made that decision. You know, life is only such a short period, and why do we have to make it even more complicated when, especially looking at children? Because our children are the innocent victims in all of this, and they don't have a say, and it's really hard on them. I'm sure you're going to give us a lot of stories this evening about some of the cases that you've dealt with, so that our listeners can get a bigger picture of why we're talking about this and why we need to come forward and be part of this research and make things better.
Yes. The research that we've looked at, and there's a huge amount of emerging research from child psychologists, makes it clear that the actual separation of parents or divorce itself is not of itself a risk factor or a harmful factor for children's outcomes. And by that, I mean their outcomes in relation to school, their education, their emotional development, their physical development, all of these, and their social skills. So all of these developmental changes that happen in children are not necessarily affected by the breakdown of their parents' marriage or relationship, if that's dealt with in a positive, solution-focused way. But it is the conflict itself. It is the arguments. And actually the phrase that I would like to share with you, one that's being used repeatedly by the experts, is that conflict harms children if it is frequent, if it is intense, and if it is poorly resolved. And the phrase they use is the type of conflict can range from silence to violence. And that's a nice rhyme for us to remember. I think we think, and certainly as a woman, if I may say, that sort of silent behaviour, if anyone has ever done this, I know I have, of being upset with my partner, not wanting to talk to him, not wanting an argument, but also not wanting to talk to him. And thinking that perhaps my children, who are now, adults, but thinking that they didn't notice. But I know from speaking to them that they did. So the banging of the kitchen cupboards, the putting my cup back in the sink a little bit harder than I should, the stomping up the stairs, maybe leaving a room when he walks in. We know that children pick this up. And we know actually that the evidence is that children from really 5, 6 onwards are picking that up. Children younger than that, they need kind of more open, shouting type of arguments. But children from 5, 6 onwards are picking that sort of low, very low level, what many of us might think is just normal argument type up at home. So that's one of the things that we really are looking at.
Oh, wow. That's a lot, and it's great that you've pulled it out like this, because that, as you say, it happens in a lot of families. And you deliver parenting programs. We talk about communication, and we talk about children subconsciously picking up things. That it's really important that children are seeing the proper way to communicate, so that they are learning the proper way for their own development, their own growth, their own marriages when the time comes. So it's hard when something like that happens, indeed. So listeners, you're tuned into Unity FM 93.5. My name is Kathleen Roche-Nagi. I'm here in the studio with Eleni. We're talking about marriage and divorce. We're going to be talking more in detail about divorces and what happens to the children. And we really want you to ring us in, please. If you have been through a situation like this, or you know somebody, we don't need your name. It can be all anonymous. You can tell us a false name. That's no problem. We just want to hear from you, because we're trying to talk about some research that's going on and how to make the system and things better for you, or for your friends, or for your neighbours, or for your siblings, or for your children when they grow up, if they have issues and have to face something like this. How can the system be made better indeed? How can the system be made better? Let us go back to this research and what you're doing, and what can we do?
Okay, so just a bit of history, Kathleen. So the law that kind of covers anything where parents come to court and say, I want my children to live with me, and they're arguing about where the children are going to live, how often they're going to see the parent that they're not going to live with, whether they can see grandma, whether they can go on holiday with one parent or the other parent. These types of issues, the law that covers this is the Children Act, which came in 1989. Now, that act changed many things, and actually for the better, but many fathers in particular were saying that the system wasn't fair to them, that the British system was giving a preference to mothers, and that those that worked within the system, people like social workers and psychologists and the judges themselves, were biased towards women. So in 2014, a new clause was added into the Children Act, so about 8 years ago, and it's this clause that the research is looking at. And what this clause says is that the starting point when two parents come to court is before the judge hears anything. The starting point for the judge is that both mother and father should be involved in a child's life, unless there is danger to the child, unless the expression is, it is not in the child's welfare. Now, what the research is trying to find out is, have the courts really been using this clause as a starting point? Is there still bias towards mother or father? And for us, most importantly, is it different for Black, Asian, Muslim parents, other minority ethnic groups? Do they have a different experience because of their faith, or because of their cultural traditions, do they have a different experience through the court process than a white British person? So that's essentially the research. We are feeding back to the Ministry of Justice. We will prepare a report from interviewing people, and we've started those interviews. I've been interviewing people. Some things are already coming out. We'll pull out themes that we're hearing. Certainly, I'm not going to share those things with you. That would be wrong from a research perspective. But as you've said, about your callers, the information that we're looking for is going to be anonymous. We're not going to identify anybody in the report. We've been given permission by the highest judge in the country to speak to individual people about their cases. Most often people in the family court are told that they must never talk to other people about the case, but we have permission. Everything is confidential. Interviews, I don't know, I may as well tell you how the interviews are going to be. They take about an hour. It's one-to-one. I hope people feel comfortable with me, but what I say to everybody is say what you want to say. If at any point people feel uncomfortable, we stop the interview. We can take a break, and what we can offer is some support and some signposting to other organisations. What many parents are telling us is, even though their cases may have ended a couple of years ago, that feelings, it's an emotional thing. This is about our babies. They are the most precious people to us. And so we know that this is a difficult thing, but it can be therapeutic to talk through the process. As I say, the interview's about an hour. We take that information and then we look as an overview at all of our interviews and see if there are repeating themes. Is it different, for example, for Asian women wearing a hijab? Do the British courts make some sort of stereotypical assumptions about those mums? I don't know. But if we see that sort of thing coming through, that will be part of our report. Anyone who wants to take part, we do give a thank you voucher for their hour's time of £25. It's a shopping voucher that people can use for basics like food, but can also use for a treat for themselves or for their children, however they want to use it. And as you have said, Kathleen, they can be helping their brother, their sister, their cousin, and even, I love the way you put it, their children, because this will hopefully bring changes that can make a difference for generations to come.
We hope so too, indeed. And when you're doing this piece of research, and it's really good, we don't often hear of something that happened in law and then there's a piece of research to see what is the outcome? Is this working or not working? That's really amazing, actually. I don't think I've come across something like this before. Is this unique?
I don't think so. I think it's just that we don't hear about these things. And specifically, I think this is where the foundation, I think we feel very proud that we are gaining some a reputation, if you like, for being a vehicle through which we can reach these unheard voices, just normal people who are living their lives and who may have been unhappy with a system but don't know who to turn to. This is your opportunity to have your say and have your voice heard.
And when we're talking, we'll come to a break in about a minute, so listeners do tune in and do get ready to ring us back after the break. But we're talking about here in this research people from all different professional backgrounds.
Absolutely. Anybody and everybody. And if you're not sure if you're eligible, come forward anyway and have a chat with me. And if you're not, oh well. we've said hello to each other. And if you are and you decide to go forward, that's fantastic too.
That's brilliant indeed. And mums and dads?
Yes, please. Obviously, and this is why we argue, isn't it? We each have our different perspectives on a situation. So I'd like to, as much as we can, keep a balance of fathers and mothers' perspectives.
That's really, really good. And if you are listening in and you've been through this, please do ring in this evening after this commercial break. Our number again is 0121 772 8892. Our WhatsApp or text message is 079 47 773 949. Even if you want to ring in, just say hello, welcome back to the studio live. I would love to hear from you indeed, just to make sure you're listening in this evening and that you're not being swamped with the children's voices and not being able to hear us in the studio. So we're ending now for commercial break. We'll see you inshallah in a couple of minutes.
Following is a repeat show that was previously broadcast on Unity FM.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Parenting Hour. You're tuned into Unity FM 93.5 here in the heart of the West Midlands. And also you are tuned in on Inspire FM 105.1 if you're listening to us in Luton or Milton Keynes. I know this is a drive time home show and you may not be able to access a phone safely, and we don't want to put you in danger. However, we are talking about a very important topic this evening, and we really would like to have some discussions with some of you listeners this evening about the research that we're trying to do that is changing the law. So it's making history here today. Our number in the studio is 0121 772 8892. We do have a WhatsApp and text message. If you want to send us a message, we can also read out that and engage with you that way. And that is 079 47 773 949. And of course, the studio email is studio@unityfm.net. It may be that you don't want to ring in live on the air. If you want to, you can go through our studio manager and we can make things very comfortable for you here indeed. We won't even use your name, but we'd love to hear from you as we're talking about the law that's changing, or that did change in 2014. And did they get it right or not in relation to our ethnic minority families, in relation to you when it comes to custody of children and care of children and divorce? So let me go back to Elani again, who is really doing this research, and she mentioned earlier on that she's compensating people for their time and trying to pull stories together. And I just want to ask you, Elani, what do you think is preventing our Muslim community in particular, our ethnic minority communities, wherever they're from, whether they're from an Asian background or an Arabic background or a European background, whatever they're from, what's preventing them from getting involved in this piece of research?
I think we are private people. We are private people. This is about our family, and nothing is more private. This is our private life. And for many of us, we have been raised, I certainly was raised, to keep family things within the family, and also to be somewhat skeptical. I don't want to use the word afraid, but careful with those in authority. That's certainly something we hear time and again from parents who have come forward to be interviewed. What I can do is reassure people that I understand their fears and their concerns, that we will go at the pace of that they feel comfortable with. And as you've said, we want people to feel comfortable and safe. Mm-hmm. But this is a chance to make a difference. If your experience was unpleasant, if you think it could be better for others, and most importantly, if you feel that your children, in particular your children, were affected by the process, if their needs were not given enough weight. Many parents feel, for example, if they're in mixed relationships, if there is a mixed faith relationship, is the Islamic side of your child being heard? So this is a chance to have your say. Hopefully the knowledge that you will remain confidential and anonymous will help, but I do appreciate the reluctance. It is about trust, and I hope that by hearing my voice, by knowing that our organisations know each other, that we will be able to gain some trust. I mean, one thing that I'm more than happy to do is travel up to Birmingham or any area actually, to actually visit people face to face, and we can organise a venue. We can even organise some support for childcare and some travel expenses if that helps people too. We don't want people to be out of pocket, or, certainly those with young children to think, what can I do with my children? We need to create a safe, comfortable place for them to be able to speak freely for an hour, and we will support that in whatever way we can.
That's really good to know. And just as you were talking there, I was thinking, this is really good because we're trying to change things for the better. We're trying to do things right, and you're there giving people travelling expenses, so it is an hour of their time, but you have a voucher even for that as a thank you for their time. So what is it that prevents people from coming forward like this? Are we shy in the Muslim community that we don't want to talk about something like that? We've been through it, it was really tough. I don't want to open that door again. I don't want to think about that again. Is that... Possibly, I think many people feel this way. If you are the type of person that once you have been through something traumatic, you feel that it's healthier to look forward rather than backwards, then yes, life is short. And once we have got through a difficult time, we want to look forward, and it's right for us to look forward, especially for our own sake, but more importantly for the sake of our children. So I completely understand people may not want to go back to that emotionally stressful time when their relationship was breaking down, and all sorts of things have been happening. We know that when relationships break down, it has a knock-on effect. People may have to move home. Economically, things may be different. There may not be as much money. Children may have to change schools. All sorts of things happen. And so people may not want to revisit that. And again, I completely understand. But, as you say, that the Muslim voice is incredibly important. Otherwise, we cannot get those changes. We've worked a lot with the NHS as an organisation to bring about some changes, and with focus groups that we've had with Muslim women, for example, we worked on breast cancer screening, and to make sure that women felt comfortable, so that units are run by women. There isn't a man in sight, so that women didn't avoid having those checks, because those checks are life-saving. So these are things where it might be just as embarrassing. We're not talking about a part of the body in that way, but this is as personal. And we have made changes there, and we can make changes here. And I know being involved in some of these things, especially when you talk about the NHS and listening to women's voices and really taking those voices on board, there has been really positive changes. I mean, it really has made an impact. So the same thing can happen here in law, even in law?
Yeah, even in law. Even in law. As someone who worked in the system for 20 years, I think us lawyers get a bad press. Some of us are okay. And you know, ultimately, the law is very clear. The priority is the child. It's what's best for the child. And we know what's best for the child is, if we can, not to cut either parent away, to raise our children with our values. And if they are Islamic values, that's very important. We mustn't lose that foundation, that root for our child is what gives them the strength, the resilience to grow into the wonderful humans we know they can be.
Indeed, we do want to do that, and we want to hear from mums, as you mentioned, but especially from dads, because, and why I'm saying dads is, we know as an organisation we've often been approached by dads who find it really hard even to get custody of their children, to see their children, and they feel that they've don't deserve this. And often they do a one-to-one parenting course just to be able to get that certificate to prove to the court, look, I'm changing, I'm trying to learn the proper way, I'm implementing techniques and tools so I cannot be excluded from my children, so I can see my children. So it is really good to hear from them as well, to hear what's going on.
Absolutely. I agree with you. We too, are approached by fathers, and it seems still to be a condition almost that courts are saying to fathers, for you to be involved in your child's life, we would like you to do a parenting course and learn some new techniques. It appears not to be the same for mothers. So yes, I think fathers really have an unheard voice when it comes to parenting for many reasons, often because they're out there working. But as you say, we often hear from fathers who are struggling to either have custody, have their children live with them, or to have, a contact relationship, visiting their children to visit them where they're now living. And many of them find it very difficult to know where to turn, where to get help. And it would be interesting to hear from fathers, what information do they get from the courts? What support is that family court system offering them, if any?
Mm-hmm. Definitely, indeed, because they're often, feel where they are, I'm sure, are part of the problem, and we're not taking one side to the other. There's always two that to make this problem. It's the children that are the innocent victims in all of this, and we need to take on board what they're going through, what they have heard or observed for years, and the impact of that on them, and how can we make things better for them. And this is why we're doing this research, to be able to make things better for them. So listeners, please ring in, pass on the message this evening of what we're talking about, even if you're not able to ring in, of what's going on, why are we doing this, to people that that have gone through a divorce, so that we can hear from them, so that we can make things better. As you were talking there about the dads, I was just thinking about some research. I went to a course recently where we had a researcher talking about domestic abuse, and she's done a lot of research around this, and she is preparing to present it, so I can't go into too much detail, but she's preparing to present it out and publish it about this research. But what she has discovered in her process, in her research, is that the traditional way of looking at domestic abuse is much more complicated when we're talking about ethnic minority families. Because we need to think about the extended family, we need to think about the imams or the leaders when those people go to for advice and their involvement.
Yes.
So there's a lot more parameters and a lot more people involved in all of this. So I know that's a little bit different, but it's related to this because we're talking.
Totally.
Yeah. So what about, what do you think about that, about extended families and the roles of the extended families, the roles of our spiritual leaders, our imams?
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because, again, this idea of a nuclear family, which sort of came from the 1950s, United States and the UK, kind of Europe and the United States, where there is a mother and father, and I think it used to be 2.2 children, doesn't actually exist for many of us. The younger generation is certainly doing things differently. And if we ignore the community, whatever our community might be, so for many of us, it's an extended family. For many of us, it will be an imam, or it will be a priest, or a family elder. So uncles, aunties, that sort of person. If we ignore their involvement, we are missing a huge amount. So the definition of domestic abuse for many professionals is when one partner is isolated from everybody. Now, of course, if a couple are living in an extended family, that isolation is not going to look the same as a couple who are living in a flat miles away from any friends or family. It will look very different. So for professionals, I think they struggle to work with families who look different to this kind of theoretical example that they are given. So I welcome the research. We know that our communities, ultimately our families, should give us support, love, help. There are wonderful traditions from many of our Eastern countries where, you know, on the birth of a child, the mother is cherished and supported and nurtured as much as the child. And that is a beautiful thing. But we also know that our families can place pressures on us, especially elderly parents, for example, who need care too. Teenagers with all the issues they have. In any of our work, I guess, when we're delivering our parenting support, Kathleen, I guess what we talk about often is that the world is ever changing. You know, we didn't have the internet, did we? Certainly not when I was a young teenager. And we know that our children, even in our own homes, can be talking to people we don't know. We may certainly not want them to talk to, and may certainly not be safe. So there are so many issues, from the closer community of extended family to the wider community at school, and the internet then brings us to the world, that if we ignore these things, I think we're in danger, all of us. But having a spiritual leader, I think, again, we're missing a trick. I think an imam, a priest, an elder who gives us this wider, bigger spiritual picture can refer us to teachings, the Word of God, in fact, on certain topics. For some of us, this is very powerful, and for some of us, it is very important. We need this support. We believe in this support. So, again, I think it is a mistake for us to ignore our faith.
It is definitely, and this will come out, I'm sure, in the research, the importance of the extended family in the role of, you know, when a couple is going through something like this, because when we're talking about marriage and divorce, from a Muslim point of view, it is coming together of two families. So if there is an issue, it's going to be, again, the discontinuation of those two families and the influence of those families. So if the family is saying, you know, we don't want to talk about this, or don't ring in about this research, or why are you opening up those doors again, or why are you hanging out your washing, we used to have saying in Ireland like this, because culture is very similar to Irish culture, hanging out your washing in public. You know, we don't be doing this, you've been through it. But this is a bit different. This is very confidential. This is a process of where we're trying to look at what's happening at the moment to make it better for our children in the future and our grandchildren in the future, and to prevent issues from happening.
Absolutely. And, we know that we all get advice from our mothers and our fathers and our uncles and our aunts. And this is not for parents to take any steps further. Nothing will happen directly from them speaking to us, except this bigger change, which will come from us collecting these views. But if they don't join in, their voice just doesn't get heard.
Mm-hmm. So if there's somebody listening to this evening but didn't want to ring in because maybe they felt that their voice is going to be recognised, or somebody might hear it or pass it on, and and just don't want to be public like this on the radio, which I can understand, what's the best contact number for them, or the best way to reach you?
I can be reached in lots of ways. Email, or I have work mobile telephone number which I can give out. Whatever people really want to do, I'm more than happy. As I say, I'm not selling double glazing or any of these sort of hard sell things. I'm here to listen, and if people feel that they've got 5 minutes to say, Eleni, this happened to me, or I'm just interested, can I ask a question? I'm more than happy to answer any question and say, if someone says, actually, no, it's not for me, I just wanted to check, that's absolutely fine.
Brilliant indeed. And of course, listeners, we're here on Unity FM. The studio is live from early morning until late in the evening time. The number is 0121 772 8892. You can call, pick up the phone, leave your number. We will pass it on. Everything will be kept very confidential indeed, so that we don't even need to know your name, just your number, and we will pass it on to Eleni, and she can ring you back indeed, and then make an appointment of when it's convenient for both of you, or when she's going to come up to Birmingham to meet you, or if you're in Luton area, if you're listening to us on Inspire FM, we can arrange also for you to meet face to face or over Zoom or whatever. Now there's lots of ways. Actually, I can see her here in front of me. It's like doing a TV program, although our listeners cannot see you. I'm privileged to be here and actually have an interaction with you from the studio, which is lovely indeed, that we're getting people from all over the country and all over the world on Unity FM, and being able to get the messages out there to help our communities in every way we can, in every possible way we can do it. What would you like to see come out of this research? If there's one or two things that comes to your mind that you would like to see, at the end of this will make a difference to our families.
I think ultimately I would very much like, I think most of us professionals working with families, and I think probably most families, when the high emotion it is not there, when their time has passed and people are calmer, I think most of us believe that it is right for a child to have the love of both parents, if both parents are there to give that love, as long as it's safe for that to happen. I would very much like everybody, every community, to have access to good advice, and for this message to be out there from very early on, so that people don't use their children in a sort of spiteful way. And we know this happens, and it's very difficult when we're upset for it not to happen. You can't see your baby because you've been horrible to me. And that information to come out much earlier on for people. So for there to be equal access for us all to good advice. Lawyers are very expensive. the legal aid system has all but collapsed. It's very, very limited that people can apply for legal aid. The other thing is for the courts themselves and the professionals working within the system to have a better understanding of our communities, to not make assumptions on stereotypes, to not assume because a woman is wearing a hijab that she is a housewife, for example, or that she has certain views on gender roles, and also to understand the different ways we all live. Again, not to make assumptions, and to allow families to be exactly what they are. If it is an extended family, it's important that we acknowledge that and we take the strengths from that and use it for the benefit of our children. But ultimately, I hope that what happens is that everybody feels that they have access to a system that works best for their family. And it may be that we need to deliver more training to people working within the courts. And also, you mentioned the hanging out of the washing, and also take away, is it stigma? Is it concern maybe that I spoke to a parent earlier today about social services becoming involved? Could this thing become much more serious? Do we want to keep the authorities away because of that? I don't know.
There's a lot there, and we're in the last few seconds of the show, which is amazing that the time goes by so quickly here. But what we're trying to do is put the child in the heart and look at how we can have better systems for parents, for grandparents, for communities to be able to nurture that child and have a better future indeed. And we all need to come together to do that. So it takes a village to raise a child, as we know, whether you've been divorced or not. And we need to make things better. Brilliant having you on the show this evening. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being there and giving your time. We hope that your listeners will contact us. And until next week, listeners, have a good week, inshallah, and look after yourself. Assalamu alaikum.